All right, Carol,
Yes.
great to be here sitting at one of your beautiful offices. Thank
That's
you for
right.
welcoming me here.
No, thank you for coming. Yeah.
Thank you, amazing. And everybody tuning in, welcome to the My Purpose Path podcast. I'm your host, Jonas, and I'm here with Carol today. Carol, why don't you introduce yourself briefly that everybody knows who we're
Sure.
speaking to today?
Sure. My name is Carol, and I am Chinese Canadian. We're currently here in Beijing at one of our offices, and I work for a company that teaches Chinese classics, Chinese philosophy, combined with business practices to help businesses large and small in China to find their purpose as well.
Amazing. And the impact you have on entrepreneurs, on companies in China, current and also the next generation is massive.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to be learning more together with everybody tuning in.
Yeah.
To start, Carol, you said you're Chinese Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
I love to learn a bit more about, we call it your own purpose path,
Sure.
how you found your journey back to China,
Mm-hmm.
and how did you find your calling to do what you're doing now with the work you're doing here that is so meaningful?
Yeah, so I was originally born in China, and I immigrated to Canada with my parents when I was around 10. And I spent, my formative years in Canada, finished my undergrad and my master's there. But periodically, I would come back to China, right? For example, in 2008, when we held the Summer Olympics, I was in China, and that was I would say, a milestone in my understanding of China's development and its place on the world stage. I was like, wow, like,
what was the most impressive? For me, my first trip to China ever was 2015. So,
well,
what
2008, just the opening ceremony itself, it was mind blowing. Like, I wasn't in Beijing at the time. I watched it on TV, and I was like, I was blown away by what was presented to the world, basically. And because I left in 2004, and then my first trip back was in 2008. And so 4 years, 4 short years, and I come from a third tier city, not one of the largest, but I could see people's living standards were really growing, right? When I left, our family was one of the only few families, for example, in my class that had like cars, right? But by the time I came back, pretty much everybody had cars, right? And nice apartments and stuff like that. And then I would come back to China every, a few years. But because my hometown is a coastal city in Jiangsu, so one of the wealthier provinces. And so I wanted to see the inlands of China as well, because I knew there was a, wealth distribution wasn't the most equal. And so when I graduated high school, I also came back to China to volunteer in the summer to go to places that are poor to see how their education system was like, etc. And I think it was in high school, I would say, and during my trips back, that confirmed my idea of, what, I want to come back to China after I finished my education. And so that's what I did. I finished my master's degree. I did a master's in conference interpreting. That means interpreting like real time simultaneously as well as consecutively for really important meetings that would need this kind of interpretation services. And I came back at the end of 2017. Yeah, but I didn't find my like true calling till like 3 years later.
You were starting out in it was Pan Daily.
I did.
I remember when we first met around 2017, 18, right?
Yeah.
And so there was an reporting.
That's right. I did do a stint in media and did podcasting as well. Yay. Tech Plus China podcast, as well as Analyze Asia podcast, if anyone has heard of them. So I spent some time with Pan Daily where I reported on the Chinese tech scene to the outside world. We created our YouTube channel, podcast, and then did a lot of reports as well. And then later on, I also did a bit of work for Radii China, more as a contributor, but that was when COVID hit already. So a lot of my content, involved around COVID. And if you, search me up on Twitter, I haven't been really active, but most of my posts were during like the COVID times. But because my education was in interpreting, so I also did a lot of interpreting throughout. And one of the largest projects that I've been involved with was there's a Chinese company that's called ZTE, and they're second largest telecom company after Huawei. Yeah, and they violated the U.S. Export control law way back. I think it's been quite a while, and so I worked with the law firm appointed by the U.S. government to kind of monitor this company, and so I was also somewhat involved in the U.S.-China trade war as an interpreter, and that led me to think, would potentially a career in law, especially like international trade law, be something that I'd be interested in. So actually 3 years ago, I was at a crossroad in my life where I was deciding, do I want to go back to North America to start law school? Yeah.
Wow, so many options.
Yeah.
Right? All starting with
That's right.
coming to China,
That's right.
and then new pathways open up. And then how did you end up in the job that you're doing right now, and that I've seen you loving and thriving? I had a chance to join 3 years ago one of your conferences.
Yeah. So that was about 3 years ago. So it was like September 2020. That's when I was applying to law school, or thinking about applying to law school. But I was really confused and lost at the time, right? Because law school was plan B. It has always been plan B. Plan A is to find that calling in China, which I didn't find at the time. It was and it was like it's been 3 years, right, since I came back. And so I was feeling like super anxious, and because you would compare yourself to your peers, right? You're like, oh, it's been 3 years. Everyone else who's on a very known path, or path, everyone has walked, then you kind of know their trajectory, right? And you're like, what am I doing? Like, it's been 3 years. Am I going to be able to find my calling, or am I just wasting my time in China? What if I want to go back to North America one day? Will these experiences be valuable at all? When would be that tipping point where if I don't leave, I won't be able to leave, right? And so lots of questions, a lot of anxiety. And that's when I started taking classes with the organization that I'm with now. Initially, I came to contact because in 2019, they held a entrepreneurial forum. It was at the Yanqi Lake location, which was like a G20 location. It's like a huge venue.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. And it was an event that 4,000 people attended offline, but a lot more online. So it was like a huge event. I interpreted for the event for about 7 days.
Wow.
That's when I first came to know this organization. But at the time, I really didn't know what they did, except that there were a lot of like really successful entrepreneurs that studied with them and said great things about them, right? But I'm like, I'm not an entrepreneur, and these businesses are huge businesses, and so I felt like this is very removed from my life. But in 2020, when I interpreted for one of their online courses, it was like a 100-day course, when I got to see the inner workings of how they actually help these companies, and very specific companies with specific and different problems. And they taught different classics. And I felt like, wow, this class is so interesting. And it was one of the harder jobs that I've ever done, because I needed to study up on a lot of Chinese classics, right? And that was an opportunity for me to grow personally. And that's kind of rare in what I was doing then, because I felt like things were so repetitive. I wasn't growing, which is why I didn't want to continue to work as an interpreter, and was seeking other opportunities of growth, for example, law school, And so September 2020, they opened up a class. It was free. It was for young people who are very smart, but very lost. Right. And so there was like 100 of us that attended online.
You were like, this sounds like
that's right. And it was free, and it only required 1 hour of your time every day.
Damn, I should have joined.
Yeah, right.
Like that as well.
Seriously, it was great. And it was only 28 days, and it transformed my life pretty much. Like pretty much every day after class, I would call my parents, who are still in Toronto. I'll be like, Mom, like Dad, like this is what I learned today, And it was like, woof, mind blowing. I'll share one story. Like, there was one exercise that we did, is find things that you want to change about yourself. Maybe find 2, right? And then trace it back. See if you see the same problems in your parents. And then trace it back 1 generation further. See if it also exists in your grandparents, right?
Beautiful exercise.
And I was like, holy shit. I was like, damn, like there are things that I want to change about myself. And I could see how exactly, like how that was passed down through my parents to me. And they might not be aware of that either, and that's really scary, right? And I'm like, now that I am aware that these things are unconsciously passed down, I don't want to continue, first of all, with in my life with these things that I don't want. And I, of course, don't want to pass it down to my kids, right? And but I've never looked at things that way before. And it's definitely not blaming our parents, right? Because most people, they are just oblivious, to a lot of things. For example, greed, right? It will lead you to make decisions that you'll regret later. Or not having enough ambition, being really complacent, not wanting to accomplish too much in your life. But we all have that desire to actually do more, right? But then if you, on one hand, have really grand goals, but on the other are complacent in your everyday actions, then you become very conflicted, right? Anyway, so that's just like one of the exercises that we did, and that was pretty transformative. I called my mom and my dad separately that night to share what I found and how I see
for each individually.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. And they admitted it. They were like, yeah. They're like, you're right. Like that is something that has been passed down.
Contemplation, as we discussed during lunchtime.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So after those 28 days, I had to make a decision. Like, do I, continue with law school, or do I want to come here to work for them because they've gave me an offer? And I came here and asked the founder of our organization. And of course, any wise person wouldn't give a straight answer, right? And when I went to his office, and that happened to be on the last day of 2020, so December 31st, 2020, I went into our founder, Dr. Bai, his office. And in his office, there was a wall of, 四库全书, the wall of classics that you showed earlier in our office. And that was the first time that I ever laid eyes on a physical copy of the collections that I've always heard about. Because that collection, it was compiled, I think, about 400 or 500 years ago, sometime in the Qing dynasty.
Just jumping in here, for those who don't know the Chinese classics, they include books from, for example, my favorite, Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching, and Ming, and
Confucius, Mencius, exactly. And Art of War, people like that. Yeah.
From Sun Tzu, people might be more familiar with that. But then also, maybe now, what's the exact name of your organization?
Right.
And then you have one particular classic, kind of like your superhero.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, let's finish up the story, and then I love to dive into that as well.
Sure. So finishing up, but that was on the last day of December 31st when I laid my eyes on this beautiful collection, and I spent 4 hours in solitude, conversing with myself, but also with the wall of classics in front of me, really asking some tough questions like, did you want to go to law school? Is it because you want to have like an Ivy League, grad, like to your name? Is it because you want, a certain type of security? Did you want people to look at you a certain way, knowing that you're a lawyer? You know what I mean? Or is it really like what you wrote in your personal statement, for world peace? But if it's for world peace, is that really the best path or route to achieve your purpose? Or potentially would, studying Chinese classics, sharing what China's really about with the rest of the world, and changing China's relationship with the rest of the world, contribute greater to the ultimate goal of world peace? So a lot of really, really tough questions. And it was through a lot of these, really talking to myself very sincerely, that I arrived at the answer of, joining this current organization. And we don't really have an English name. In Chinese, we're called Runzeyuan. Runzeyuan. Yeah, you can search that up.
It's a Wen, like
Runzeyuan. Runzeyuan. That's right. Beijing Runzeyuan 教育科技有限公司. Yes, that is the full name. We don't really have. You can write it out later. And we have an app on the same name. Yes, that's right. So you can find us in a lot of different places.
Cool. Okay, we'll make sure to link these resources so people can also look into and study. Your classes are widely popular. I see frequently posts on Instagram and WeChat with huge conferences.
Yes.
I know last time when we went to the offline event, there were also many people like tuning into the live stream.
Yeah.
You had tens of thousands of attendees to your classes. Earlier, you told me one book was sold out with 100 million
Yes,
copies,
that's right.
right?
That's right.
For tiny countries like Canada, well, big country with tiny population,
Yeah.
and Germany being a fairly small country as well in terms of
Yeah.
population
Yeah.
and size. It's like 100 million copies. That's more than the German population, right? That is impressive, right?
Yeah.
So certainly you guys have massive impact, right?
That's right.
And like from your perspective, like what is it that people are going to get by studying from here? What do they get from the Chinese classics?
I mean, the name of your podcast kind of explains it very well. It's like finding purpose, right? I think when China finally started to embrace, like, you know, the capital market or, you know, business and trade, it hasn't been that long, right? After, you know what I mean? And so initially, maybe 40 years back, when people started companies, when they were founded companies, often it was just to make a living, right? Just to, you know, bring more bread onto the table, right? And it's been, you know, more than 4 decades of reform and opening up, and a lot of businesses have grown significantly. And some of their if initially they just wanted to bring food on the table, they've achieved that goal like long time ago. So they really need to find like greater purpose, or then they don't know why they're doing this for, right? Yet it needs to keep going, right? And so often these entrepreneurs, because they are stuck, because they feel like, oh, there isn't enough strength like internally to you know, push me to go further,
keep going into the next
that's
chapter.
right that they will come to us. And also right now, because the times are tough, right, the economic times are tough, and people lose confidence, lose faith, and that's why they come to us. And so what we do, or what we help them to do, is to connect with the classics that would empower them, basically. To give them guidance, to help them find purpose, and to help more people find purpose in life, right? Because work takes up so much of your life, so much of your time, that it needs to have a greater purpose than just working for money.
True. That's what I've been talking about for many years. People who know me know that. Yeah, that's amazing. And in the West, probably Sun Tzu's Out of War is the probably
most popular,
best known, most popular book of the classics, right? People used it for like military strategy or general wisdom for many years. And what do you say is like, in your opinion or your institution's opinion, like what is the most impactful classic, and maybe what are 1 or 2 of the main lessons that you draw and share from there? Maybe from your own personal perspective.
Sure. So here at our institution, we mainly teach 2 classics, or we combine it with business practices. One, which is more popular or well known, is Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, or Tao Te Ching. Many people might have heard of that. And the second, which is lesser known outside of Asia, that is the Ming philosophy of the mind, Ming Xinxue. So Master Ming is a Chinese philosopher, but also a general, a military strategist, educator, calligrapher, a lot of titles, from Ming Dynasty about 550 years ago.
So fairly recent.
Fairly recent in comparison to like Lao Tzu, which is 2,500 years ago. That's right. And so he kind of combined Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, all these thoughts together, you know, and that's what we also call Neo-Confucianism. So bringing Confucianism to like a new height. And his thoughts are also really popular in Japan. It influenced the Meiji Restoration that really changed or shaped modern day Japan. So that these are the 2 main schools of thought that we teach here at the institution. And some of the easier concepts to grab, for example, Master Ming, one of his, I guess, top 3 concepts or ideas, one is called the unity of knowledge and action.
The unity of knowledge and action.
知行合一, the unity of knowledge and action. And we often ask people, you know, are there moments in life where you feel like you know this is the right thing to do, but you just don't do it? And often people say, tons, right? I know I should sleep early, but I don't. I know I shouldn't smoke, but I do. right? But we tell people actually, your knowledge and your action are one. You act that way because you don't actually believe. You don't actually believe smoking is bad for you. You think it's good for you because it makes you feel better. And you think health is not as important as feeling, you know, less anxious or less whatever at the point.
True.
You know, stuff like that. So we really help people see what their true beliefs are. Right? You have to first understand that you don't actually believe what you think you believe in order to change your beliefs, in order to change your actions.
I have a very personal and powerful story about
Yeah,
that myself,
yeah.
but that's for another day. Yes.
Yeah. So so that is part of what we teach for Young Ming philosophy of the mind. But a lot of our entrepreneurs study with us, right? And so they draw a lot of strength from this school of thought. And we teach. There's just so much wealth of knowledge, and we read his original works from 500 years ago. So letters that he's written to his son, letters that he's written to his disciples, to his students, etc. And we would study these, and we would draw lessons that would apply to everyday life, and both to personal growth and also to how to manage a business, how to fight a war, stuff like that.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm so looking forward for some of these works to be available in English, because I think that would be so enriching for the world, and also one of my missions to connect East and West. And it should go in both ways. Everybody who knows the statistic knows there's so many more Chinese people go study, live, work overseas versus people coming here, right? That's why I only can encourage people to actually come to China, spend more time here, but then also like reading up on these classics can be really enriching. So are there any plans to, for example, the book that sold out here so successfully, for that to be available in English?
Oh, that's a good question. Future? So the book that you're talking about, that was it first came out in 2018, and we translated the then version back in 2018. Of the English copy wasn't as popular, of course, but still quite a few thousand, if not more, were sold. I think around maybe 10,000. And we, what I showed you earlier with the yellow cover, that is the new edition, and we are just finishing up the translations.
Wow!
Yeah,
put
so
me on the list.
yes, definitely gift your copy once it's published. It should come out sometime, probably early next year or sometime next year. Yeah. Cool. So, but also with Master Yang Ming's like original writing, philosophical thoughts, that is also that needs to be translated as well, because there isn't as many translations out there. Yeah, I think there's only one that I could find online, and it was from, I don't know, 70 years ago, and it was only a part of what he, like the legacy that he has left behind. Yeah. And the other classic that we both mentioned, Tao Te Ching, as people probably know, there's just so many translated copies, and some of which I don't quite agree with. A lot of mistranslations, I would say, especially by people who don't even read Chinese, right? They just like look at different copies and they come up with their own. That's crazy. So starting from last year, I've been doing this video project where I would make short videos in English, sharing my understanding of certain chapters from Tao Te Ching. And I didn't do it this year because I wanted to deepen my own understanding more. But in the future, there will definitely be more works in English to share with our audience. Yeah.
Great. That's amazing. And like, since it's been like, we're nearly approaching the end of the year, right?
That's right.
We are in early December now. So it's approaching like soon 3 years with the company. Like, what's been the biggest evolutions in your own personal journey here? Like, first of all, congrats from my side for not making the bandwagon jump to go back to law school like so many do, right? You embrace your unique purpose path, and that's why I'm very happy to interview you here. And like, what's been the biggest like learning or transformation in your life since actually being immersed in those classics?
When I made that call on the last day of 2020 to my parents, telling my Asian parents that I'm no longer applying to law school, I feared that they were going to be like really upset with me, right? They would be upset with me. But surprisingly, my mom was very supportive, because she said, especially in the West, you can go to school to get a degree whenever.
Mm.
There really isn't an age limit. But
100%.
it is really rare for you to find a place in life where it changes you from like within, like to change you as a person, to make you a better person, right? Because school doesn't actually, it's supposed to do that,
Yep.
but it doesn't actually do that. It gives you knowledge.
It can, right?
Yeah,
It's like one of those places you have all the chances, all
Yep.
the possibilities,
Yep.
but then is the trigger point going to happen there?
That's right.
That's the big question.
That's right. And so she knew through my 28-day classes, she knew that I was being transformed as a person for the better, here. So she was really happy with my decision here. And I would say two of my greatest learnings, one is my relationship with my parents. I used to be such a rebel, like as a child.
I can see that.
Right. But I used to have like fights with my mom, not just like, like verbal fights. I used to have physical fights with my mom. Like it was really intense. And our relationship did become better as I grew up, and could understand them more. But I think being here, it really made me understand that your relationship with your parents equals, or it translates to, your relationship with the world. Like your relationship with the world cannot be better than your relationship with your parents, because there's pretty much no one in this world that has given you as much to, like given me or given you as much as your parents have. If you can't even feel grateful towards your parents, if you can't have a deeper connection with them, who else can you have a deeper connection with? You know what I mean? Like, so I think my relationship with my parents has improved, but I'm still working on it. Sometimes when I spend a lot of time with my mom, we still get into fights from time to time, but it really made me see, okay, like I really need to change in order to, because it's not about her. Like often we always blame, our parents, blame everyone else for making us to become the person that we are sure they've had a impact. But I think by a certain age, you really got to start to own everything yourself. And
you got to own it.
That's
exactly.
right. You can't, once past a certain age, you really should not be saying like, oh, my mom made me do this, or like my parents made me this. You now have the choice to change from within, and that will change your relationship with everybody around you. Right. And I think the second greatest lesson is probably in terms of like romantic relationships personally. So these are all things that you don't get to learn in school. Like if you want to talk about that in school, right? I felt like I now have more confidence to actually manage a romantic relationship well, and potentially getting married and or like raising a family. I now have more confidence in that, and I know a lot of young people don't really see a point, right, in getting married, in having children, or they don't have confidence that they will be a good parent, that they will be able to be responsible for another person's life, to be to contribute positively. But I think because I've studied so many classics and I've been learning so much wisdom, and that's been
reflecting
on myself. That's right. And these are tested and tried for thousands of years, right? Because for classics like Tao Te Ching or Art of War, they were made to teach generals and kings and like emperors, right? But we are all the emperor of our own life. We're all the CEO of our own life, right? And so we really got to like own it, like I said earlier. So now I have also more faith in romantic relationships with people. And I could see that I used to be fairly like selfish and like demanding, and I didn't really see that before, right? Because as a girl, you're like, oh, of course you should do all these things for me. Like, why is there a question?
You open a classic and you look into a mirror, right?
Exactly. And then I realized, oh, like that's not true, right? So definitely lots of reflections in that area, but lots more to go as well. But I think a lot of what I have gained also was with the growth of this company, right? 2 years ago, we went to our other location. This didn't exist. I feel like I work at the best location in the world because I work in it's probably the largest like park inside a city, I think, probably. But anyways, it's a beautiful place, and I'm surrounded by classics with wonderful people. I walk to a park to work every day.
You live next door, right?
I live next door.
Amazing.
So I'm like super grateful. And I know we have a lot more grand plans that I can't share on screen, but of what's to come. And I'm like so excited about the opportunities that I would have never have imagined if I stayed in Canada.
And
or if I
bring
went
some
to
of
law
that
school.
knowledge out of China as
For
well,
sure.
to foster understanding and
For sure.
and share some of that wisdom, that is not well known at all, unfortunately, around the world, but it deserves to be.
So more opportunities, for things to be done, right? Lots of creative channels to do that, and I can't wait.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add to our audience? Any advice? Any final words from your side?
If you are interested in Chinese classics, right, check out Tao Te Ching, check out Lao Tzu, because I think that's probably the easiest one to maybe get into and start like vibing with it. Yeah.
Cool. Amazing. Thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, greetings from Beijing.
Thank you, Jonas.
Over
Bye,
and
guys.
out.